Hey, folks, it is 10 a.m., May 7th on Thursday. Welcome back. You're watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I am the People's Pundit, Rich Barris. I'm joined by Tim the Source Anderson. You guys can follow us on Twitter below. You can follow me at Peoples_Pundit, and you can follow Tim at TJ Anderson1. Woo, hectic morning today, folks. Hectic morning. It's, big news day. Plus, we had a lot that we wanted to talk about. So, down to the grind this morning. So basically today, guys, on Inside the Numbers, we're going to talk about, like I've been kind of teasing with you guys all week long, we're going to talk about it's new educated voters, derelict lawmakers, and job losses. We're going to talk about what the census data is really telling us about educated voters, try to explain some of the changes we've seen over the years. We're going to talk about some of the latest from George Papadopoulos, basically what we found there, what the FBI was up to. Of course, the lack of oversight ever since the Inspector General even came out with a report about FISA abuse. They routinely abused that program. And then job losses. So let's start with the job losses. And, the markets are shrugging this off, Tim. Why don't you tell us what's going on out there?
Well, the markets are
graphics and pop on back in a second.
The markets are certainly shrugging this off, and it looks like we've seen this a couple of other times this week. We get off to a very strong start. The gains fade late in the day. We have a bad last 30 or 45 minutes. We've closed right at or near the lows of the day the last 2 days. What I particularly did not like about yesterday's final trading action was that there was just extreme divergence between the NASDAQ being up 0.5% and the Dow being down close to 1%, the S&P being down 0.7%. Look, for a one-day event, it's not that big of a deal. It happens. Technology, and specifically the big power players behind internet-driven technology, what they used to call the FANG stocks, Microsoft, Apple, Netflix, Google, et cetera, were really, really strong. But it's been a developing trend, and I really don't want to see the market, most other sectors of the market, lose steam and have 6 or 8 or 10 internet delivery stocks or stocks that support the work at home, stream 24 hours a day, potentially new age business model. I just don't want to see the leadership get so narrow that we're completely dependent on 8 to 10 to 12 stocks that are feeding the streaming internet commerce activity. That would just be way too narrow of leadership. Look, if it goes on for a few days or for a couple of weeks, that's okay. I get the fact that, when we come out of the virus environment, there are going to be some adjustments to the way we work, the way we live, the way we play, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that being said, we really want to see a broad-based recovery that involves a lot of different sectors of the economy drive the recovery of the market and the economy, not just a narrow handful or 8 to 12 stocks. We got trapped into that in going at the, I remember vividly the .com craze in 1998, 1999 that then led into the internet bubble bursting in 2000. The NASDAQ went down 80% from March of 2000 to September of 2002. It was not a pretty sight.
That's what I was just gonna bring that up when you were talking. I think it's a valid fear. We've seen that before. And we just don't want to end right back up there, which is good. Why don't we talk about the labor market, right? Let's
Yeah.
pull up jobless claims.
Yep.
So we had initial jobless claims gain about 3.2 million for the week ending May 2nd. Again, and we've kind of been seeing this, Tim, a little bit worse than the forecast, or roughly around it, but a little bit worse than the consensus, but continue to trend down. So here is the unemployment weekly insurance claims data, folks. This is the series data. Let's look at the 1 year. Okay, let's zoom into the 1 year. Obviously, it's very ugly. All right. The Labor Department reported initial jobless claims rose slightly more than expected by about 3.2 million, 3,169,000 for the week ending May 2, due to coronavirus mitigation efforts to slow the spread. Due to mitigation efforts to slow the spread of the coronavirus. That's a decrease, Tim. Again, let's go to the forecast. Range from a low of 2 million to a high of 3,420,000. So it didn't hit that high end of the forecast. The consensus was 3,041,000. We're still at roughly 30 million. We'll give you a more updated number when I have more time to crunch it. I look at everything that goes up. So I just didn't have chance this morning. We're probably looking, Tim, at what, 31 million, 32, roughly somewhere around that ballpark. Would that be in the ballpark, you think?
Yeah, if you're talking the total number of people unemployed and receiving paychecks, but not really working productively, getting paychecks from their employer that got funds from the PPP program.
That's exactly
Now, there's
right.
probably some other people that there's this Fed program that's designed for companies larger than what ideally would be the recipient of PPP funds. There's this Fed facility of 2.3 trillion that will loan money that will back up banks that are loaning money to companies, as long as those companies spend 70% of that money on salaries, wages, and benefits. So that's similar to the PPP. It's just aimed toward a larger company profile. Almost those companies that some of them actually did get PPP funds, but they really shouldn't have applied for it. The program was rolled out very, very rapidly, and they didn't really provide your typical 150-page document as to who should apply and who shouldn't apply.
Yeah. And I mean, that's right. I'm trying. So I got some questions on this after the show yesterday. Well, how many people are really unemployed? Does that include those who filed the claims, but then got, their employers got PPP? What's included in that number? So I was trying to be a little bit more thorough today.
It's very possible that there are some people that initially filed unemployment, and within 2 to 4 weeks, their company said, hey, look, we've got PPP money. It's just been approved, but we can't use it if we have people filing for unemployment. So I know you may have been filing the last couple of weeks, but please make sure you don't file next week, because you can't take money from both sources.
Right. And okay, so yeah, just trying to be a little bit more thorough. Thanks to all you guys. I see you guys firing out the show on social media. We love you for it. All right. The 4-week moving average declined nearly 1 million, almost 900,000 actually. Came down 4,173,000 from the previous week's average, which was revised. And it was revised up, but we're talking about only 1,750 claims out of such a huge number. So it went up to 5,035,000 from 5,033,250. All right, so let's scroll down here. Here's that number that I'm always harping on for good reason. The advanced seasonally adjusted insured unemployment rate rose again. I'm hoping next week we see this flatten out and come down. We should, given the claims trend that initial jobless claims have hopefully hit their plateau and will start to come down, along with the number of, but that's the thing, folks. And this lags, the initial jobless claims data lags a week, as we've told you before. This indicator, along with the number of insured unemployed. That lags another week beyond that. So this one continued to tick higher again, 3.1% higher for April 25th. You'll notice the week is April 25th. Again, it's 15.5%. Yes, that is an all-time high. Here's the chart right here. The first high during this crisis recorded at 8.2%. That's going back to the week ending April 4th. The all-time high prior to that was 7%, recorded in May of 1975. On April, for the week ending April 11th, it rose again to 11%, and then 12.4 on April 25th, which is the week before April 25th. This would be 18th. That I have to get changed. That was the one we reported to you last week. Again, look at the 1 year. It's ugly. But I'm hoping, Tim, next week we see this thing plateau right here and start to at least come down, or maybe it edges a little bit higher, but not, we've been seeing 3% and 5% jumps, not that much, but we'll see. I'm hoping we'll at least start to see some deceleration next week.
You're talking about weekly claims,
insured unemployment rate itself.
Oh, okay, right.
It's gonna lag, and it's going to climb more. But I'm hoping that we start to see a deceleration in that increase.
That would make sense, because we've seen, despite the fact that the numbers are still in the millions, we've seen now weekly first-time claims come down for three weeks in a row.
That's exactly right. That's right.
It's not to say that there aren't still a tremendous amount of people being unemployed. But you have to realize you're talking first-time claims. You can only be a first-time claimant once.
Right. Yeah. And I'm going to continue to cite this number because I think it's important. Under the Trump administration, this rate had fallen to an all-time low, which was 1.1%. It's incredible considering where we are now. But it would bob back down, bob up and down from the all-time low. It basically settled at 1.2% and remained there since 2000. I think it is. I had this up from last week, but I think going back to 2018, and then it would never go higher. Tim, it ticked back down about 3 or 4 times to 1.1. That's how tight this labor market was. And I think it's worth noting that, because you don't want to take it away from the accomplishments that we had before. The advanced number for seasonally adjusted insured unemployment, again, for the week ending April 25th, this is like the insured unemployment rate lags initial claims by a week again. So it's April 25th. That came in at 22,647,000. That's an increase of about 4.6 million from the previous week. It's a lot, but it lags. So this is something that one of those just horrible expectations we knew was coming. And I think I haven't checked the Dow or anything recently, but I mean, like Tim said, this hasn't bumped at all. And we're giving it's now 10:13. Markets have been open. They digested this report. It came out at 8:30. The previous week was revised up by about 19,000. The 4-week moving average, 17 million, which is an increase of nearly 4, about 3.8 million. And the previous week was revised up by 5,000 to 13,297,500. Very small revisions for very large numbers, right, Tim? I mean, really.
Yes, it is astounding how small the revisions are.
It's incredible. It really is.
So, that's one thing that I had wondered, really, is that a lot of these numbers are going to be so big, and a lot of the numbers on production and industrial production, capacity utilization, and retail sales numbers and so forth are going to be such large divergences from what we've seen in the past that I was curious, like, I wonder how violent the revisions will be. Well, we don't see it in these numbers. I think these numbers are very, these are very cut and dry numbers. I think these numbers come from real data the first time, and then maybe they there might be a few adjustments along the way for some technical reasons
States
or
that don't
whatever.
report, yeah,
Yeah.
and states that don't report correctly. I know in Florida we had some issues. That's why we had that 1 week, it was a week or two ago, where it was finally reported in
A
like
lot of
a
state
chunk.
systems got so swamped
Yeah,
that,
definitely.
some of these systems were put together 10 years ago, some of them maybe 25 years ago. So when all of a sudden you have millions of people trying to file online, that, you could have anything from bandwidth issues to then having a real problem getting people on the phone if you have to discuss a special situation.
Yeah, and the last thing I'd note, speaking of my state, the last thing I'd note is let's take a look at some of these states because we look at that insured unemployment rate. I think it's pretty clear, with the exception, and it's to be expected, with the exception of West Virginia, which is nearly 22% for the highest insured unemployment rates in the country. And by the way, this is for April 18th. So like Tim was saying, sometimes it just takes time for all these states to get their numbers in, but it lags. With the exception of West Virginia, who's dragging up the national insured unemployment rate? Michigan, 21.7%. If you've been watching the show on Thursdays and you've been listening to Tim and I bringing this report, Michigan has consistently been among the highest. Governor Gretchen Whitmer over there treated the entire state like Wayne County, and they're paying the price for it. I mean, this is like very
but
real
all the
numbers.
auto companies pretty much ceased operations. So I mean,
Yeah, I mean, but Michigan's more than auto.
That's going to drive that rate to 20% in a hurry.
Yeah, Michigan's more than auto, though, Tim. I mean, it is. I mean,
tourism is their second biggest industry.
Yeah, so. And then Nevada's there was, speaking of tourism, Nevada's 19.9. Right. Some of these other states had some problems before. Connecticut was really lagging anyway under the Trump boom. It's a problem with the Northeast. It's a systemic problem. The Northeast, and we've talked about this before, the Midwest, along with Michigan, and the Northeast, Connecticut, have been seen as dying. Nevada was doing well, very well, unemployment wise. Who else is dragging it up? With the exception of West Virginia, New York, Georgia, which this is good. Georgia is headed in the right direction. West Virginia is not. I mean, they're a very industry specific state. They're going to be hurt bad by this, along with the energy issues we're having. Yep. And there's more to this than meets the eye, is my point. Georgia, though, the only real exception I could think of, starting to head in the right direction, even though this lags, but they're still up there above the national average, 17.3. New York, pretty consistent, 17.2. Washington State, which was hit among the first to be hit, if everybody remembers, 17.1, also heading in the right direction. The largest increase in initial claims, and this is for April 25th, lagging a week. Washington State still a little disconcerting there. Georgia, but definitely again headed in the right direction. New York just consistently chunking in 15,000 every month now, even though they started to come down, Tim, and then they're like plateauing at 15. It's just another 14 or 15,000 every week. Oregon, 12, Alabama. The largest decreases, Tim, look at California. Woo, very highly populated state. So not to be expected. Right. We had some issues down here with our reporting system. And we've also had, look, there's a lot of people, this is for another segment, but there are a lot of people who owe Governor Ron DeSantis an apology. When this man was trying to tailor his response to meet the needs of a very diverse and very microcosm kind of state. He was trying to tailor the needs to meet a state like this. He was taking flack. I mean, everything from you're killing people.
And it is a microcosm in Florida, almost.
That's the right word, right?
I mentioned it about a week ago, but you look at the difference between the makeup of the employment in Florida and, let's just say, Texas. Okay, so Florida's probably next in line behind Texas in terms of population. In Texas, where you have massive corporate facilities that employ tens of thousands of people per company, from Texas Instruments just north of Dallas,
Right.
to American Airlines headquarters being in Dallas, to Dell Computer being over outside of the Austin area, to the oil industry with a lot of headquarters in Houston, and just then with big operations all over the state. You don't have those big corporate headquarters or corporate employers in Florida.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
a
you've
lot
got
of tourism hit us quick.
right. You've
You
got
know
tons
that.
of tourism. You've got a lot of real estate. You've got a lot of construction. You've got a lot of home and housing related services. You know, the unlike the Northeast, the landscaping services go year round in Florida. But you don't have those big corporate headquarters, and you don't have companies that are employing, tens of thousands of people.
Right. Yeah, we don't. It's very diverse, and tourism took a big hit in the beginning, but now we're starting to. Oh, and again, the week before that was a reporting issue, so it almost exacerbated our trend. It
Right.
really did. And then Connecticut, but very similar to what we were talking about before. Not a whole lot. They've had issues anyway. They're they have very small population centers, New Jersey and Pennsylvania. So I just add that before we get into, because wow, it's already 10:21. I wanted to get that at 10:30. Folks, will do the Rasmussen Reports review. All right, we'll go over it. But somebody was selected for the employment survey. I see in the reactions in the comments. Look, it's like getting selected for a poll. It's not common. The census wants you to take they're making a huge push this year for everybody and anyone to take the census. I'm getting things, Tim, from my kids' school, the public school, the county public district, the school district is sending me emails. Don't forget to sign up, because everybody wants their money, right?
Oh, of course.
So everybody wants their money. And it doesn't matter what your status is. They want you to take that survey, because then the more you take, the more you get, the more population there is. All of this too is so important. We're going to talk about new census data a little bit later in the show when we talk about educated voters, the truth about educated voters, right? There's more to the trend in educated voters than meets the eye. The media, again, oversimplifying everything. Everything's a simple narrative, and it really isn't that simple. So but we'll get into that. Surveys for the Bureau of Labor Statistics, for the Labor Department, for other economic indicators. A lot of it is done by the census. A lot of the stuff we bring you guys, those are census reports. This one that we're going to go over today is a joint report from the Census Bureau and the Bureau of Labor Statistics when we talk about education. But I just find it, they push the hell out of that census. If you got selected for a claims report, that's something. I mean, the odds of that, Tim, that's something. Yeah. But it's like getting polled. I hear all the time. I never get polled.
How many people do you hear say, "I have never been called"?
I have not. You know what? I swear, everything we do, of course, is random. Even people who sign up to our panels is random, opt-in, random panels.
Right.
I pulled Larry Schweikert once, man. It just happened. It popped up. I was polling Arizona, and I pulled Larry. A lot of people know Larry from Twitter. He's an author. He's a best-selling New York Times best-selling author, history guy. A big Trump supporter, by the way, big Trump supporter. I'm looking through, and I'll never forget that. And I didn't actually even know him that well at the time. I'm looking through the responses, and sure as hell enough, it's like Larry Schweikert, Arizona. I'm like, no. So I dig down into it. Sure enough, there it is. That's Larry. Oh man. And he answered it. And of course, very Trump supporting.
Predictable response, I'm sure.
Very predictable responses. Very funny stuff, But yeah, let's do another quick. I want to bring them this at 10:30. So I liked how we did this yesterday. We're doing the real quick update again, like 10:25, and then we'll bring you guys the as soon as Tim's done telling us what's going on in the markets. We'll bring you the latest Rasmussen survey, the results, and the intensity index. What's going on out there, Tim? Be right back.
So the markets are holding most of their very early gains. What I've liked today versus yesterday is that the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ are all up between 1.1% and 1.25%. The Dow is actually a little ahead, which is nice since it trailed so badly yesterday. Now, I think the reason it trailed yesterday was, the headlines were very, very negative for big multinational stocks, from the saber rattling between some high-ranking U.S. officials. Pompeo gave a press conference, pushed back very hard on China. The Chinese ambassador spoke about how the U.S. should be working on solving the virus, not just blaming China for everything. So there was some ugly saber rattling going on there between the high-ranking China and U.S. officials. That's always going to put pressure on big multinational stocks that are very much involved in global trade. The Dow significantly underperformed yesterday. It's not today. It's up 1.25%. The S&P is up 1.2%. The NASDAQ's up 1.1%. We would like to see them finish the day with relatively equal performance. If they can hold these levels, that would be great. They're pushing at these resistance levels that we talked about ad nauseum almost earlier in the week. S&P 500, 2,900. We're within 20 points of that. The Dow is at 23,950, pushing again at that 24,000 barrier. And the NASDAQ is actually well above 8,900 at 8,950, really close to that 9,000 level.
Right. Well, it is close enough to 10:30. And by the time I get through with the tracking poll results, we embargo, just so everybody knows, we embargo the article results, so we do the tracking poll, and which is being sponsored by PBD and Inside the Numbers this week from Monday through Sunday. We do the tracking poll, and then we'll do the article stories at 10:30. They're embargoed till 10:30. So 9:30, we'll get the approval polls. I get a little peek of it anyway, but very, very interesting stuff this morning. And I can't, in 2 minutes, I'll be able to tell you what's going on with the other polling. But let's look at the tracking poll right now. I'm going to show the article, and then we'll take a look at the article, and then the top lines, and then we'll go into that intensity index again. All right. So Trump started out this, I believed him. Where was he at? 45 or 46%? I should know this, right? Roughly around there, somewhere around there, right? So this is, here we go. This is where he started, folks. All right. He started here. Oops, that's the approval index. Yeah, that's the approval index too. All right. Well, it is what it is. He started down a few points this week. And what we have been telling you to keep an eye out for was the intensity index, which is interesting. We were looking yesterday at just the latest responses that were gathered. Not Rasmussen is a rolling average. Just the latest responses that were gathered from yesterday were really strong for Donald Trump. This was them. All right. Strongly approved was 37. Strongly disapproved was 38. That's a negative index of 1 just for that one day. The total approval was 52. Total disapproved was 45. So it's not shocking for me today to see that Trump is up a point now. He's basically got 49% of likely voters who approve of his job performance, 48 who disapprove. The intensity index, though, is 36% who strongly approve and 40% today who strongly disapprove. That gives him an intensity index of -4. Okay, there it is right there. I'm a little bit it stopped. That movement, that softening that I was telling you guys to look out for. That
He had a big 3-day move, though.
He had a big 3-day movement, and it's not surprising that it stopped. It's noteworthy. So the question moving on for the rest of the week, and we'll do Friday tomorrow, and then on Monday we'll recap over the weekend. Maybe we'll even do quick little blurbs because we're sponsoring it until Sunday. But on Monday we'll recap the entire trend of what had happened here. All right, let me show you going back the intensity index from the beginning of the week. It started off here, -9. All right. And then that softened and it went to -7 on Tuesday. Yesterday, it was a big movement, -4. Okay. So now we're stuck here a little bit at -4. But as somebody who's been polling Donald Trump for as long as I have, I can tell you guys that there's no wiggle room with Donald Trump. Okay. That you either have an opinion of Donald Trump or you don't. All right. There's very few people in the middle that can either soften or go to undecided. So when we talked about the Gallup approval poll and the difference between how Rasmussen and Gallup conducted, look at that surge among independents that Trump has had over the last week or 2 weeks, really. And well, it'd be interesting to see in Gallup too, whether or not that continues. But those independents moving along with Rasmussen's approval intensity index tightening tells you something. It tells you there's some movement there. And it's very small. Again, with Donald Trump, we're talking about maybe 7 to 9% can be truly persuaded. And then others may have more of a tendency to approve or disapprove of him over time. And, for instance, they may be a Trump supporter, but they don't like what he's doing at that particular moment. So they'll choose somewhat disapprove. I know that sounds crazy, but it happens. And then also, there are times like we've been seeing recently where people will typically say they somewhat disapprove. And with Trump, a lot of that is a pollster. What that means is that people may like his policy, but they don't particularly like him, Tim. They don't like his way he does things or his style. But if you drill down into it, and I could show you guys that, and I will, we'll set that up. Maybe that's a whole new phenomena for another show. When you say, overall, do you approve of the job Donald J. Trump is doing as president? You're going to get a very different number from when you say, on the issue of the economy and jobs, do you approve of the job Donald Trump is doing as president, or foreign policy or immigration or trade? The numbers on issues are significantly higher. Significantly. That's my experience. So it's usually, they are more motivated voters. One of the commenters said, my guess is that they're just more motivated voters than Biden supporters. And in the polls, that's going to be difficult for some pollsters to gauge. There's no doubt about it. In fact, you want to know how enthusiastic Donald Trump's voters were in 2016? I can actually show you that. I got yesterday. It's funny somebody said that, but it's also been like the topic of conversation. I will show, it's tough. It might be tough for you guys to see. I'm going to bring in anyway another poll in a second, but it may be tough for you guys to see. I'm going to show you what all of on Big Data Poll, a lot of those charts that we'll show, they have a Google sheet behind them. All right. So I'll make this Google sheet public for everybody to see. All right. And I'll put that into the show links for the day. This is from 2016. Very small. I'm going to make it bigger so you guys can see it. Much bigger. I made it much bigger. I don't know if it's much easier for you guys to see, but it was blown out in the final days. If you look just from October 31st, these are the numbers of people who were very enthusiastic. Go down a little bit. Let's get away a little bit. And you can see something a little bit closer. Look at October 10th, for instance. This is Clinton, and let me freeze the column so you guys can see it. View, freeze, up to current row. Now you guys will be able to see the column. Let's go down to like October 11th and look at the trend as time went on. Trump voters, this is Trump. That's Clinton, I mean. This is Trump, okay? Clinton, Trump. This is the extremely enthusiastic column, very enthusiastic. Clinton, she always had a bunch of supporters that were extremely enthusiastic. They just were not often, was it the case, that they were as enthusiastic as Donald Trump. And these columns shifted depending on who was in the lead. So like for October 14th, this is Trump because Trump was in the lead that day. It was a rolling average. But for October 11th, Tim, a very typical day. Here is Clinton at 33%. 33% of her voters, that's it, said they were extremely enthusiastic. 33% said they were very enthusiastic. The extremely enthusiastic column for Donald Trump was always way, way more, almost sometimes 2-1. It was incredible. I've never seen enthusiasm gaps like this before. When we reported the poll, we put extremely and very together and then separated moderately and slightly not at all. But if you just put them together, it didn't look like that big of a gap until you parsed it out by extremely. 56% of Trump voters were extremely enthusiastic compared to 33% for Hillary Clinton. Sometimes she'd get an edge on very enthusiastic, but that was only because so many more of Trump voters were extremely enthusiastic. And when you looked at the column slightly enthusiastic or not at all, there was always sometimes double. It was that big of a gap. Sometimes double. So only 6% were slightly, only 5% were not at all enthusiastic for Donald Trump. 11% were slightly, and 11% were not at all enthusiastic for Hillary Clinton. Some days were even worse. The very next day when Trump was in the lead, it was 11%, again, slightly for Clinton, but 12% for not at all. Trump actually ticked down that day, 4% slightly, 3% not at all. So just goes to show you some of the challenges that when you're polling and trying to figure out your likely voter model, how difficult it can be. Because if anyone will tell you, Tim, I mean, an enthusiasm gap that big can be good for multiple points. And that, in fact, happened to her. That is why he crept into the lead in places like Michigan. That is why. You can make an argument that her crappy turnout was why she lost the state of Michigan. You can make that argument.
Right.
But you can't make it. We've been over these states before. Check out the archives, guys. You'll see what I'm talking about. You cannot make that argument in states like Pennsylvania or Wisconsin. Right. He just beat her there. But you can make that case in Michigan. There was like several voters that were missing in Wayne County, that could have been voters. All right, the next poll I want to take a look at, because we've tracked this before, Tim, is on the FBI, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in Pundit's perspective, the abuse of the FBI. All right, but for right now, look at this poll, Tim. This is something that Rasmussen has tracked before. We've covered it before. Republicans want James Comey prosecuted. Nearly. And I texted this to you last night. I'm like, we got a good one, because I didn't expect it to still be this high. And why? Because the media is not covering it. There may be the most clearest evidence out now that the FBI broke the law to prevent Donald Trump from winning the presidency, and then later how did Bill Barr put it, Tim? To sabotage, I think he said, right?
Yeah, maybe. I can't remember exactly what words he used.
Right. Well, this article just published.
I will throw one breaking headline at you, though, just because it's a politically charged headline.
Hit me.
The Supreme Court has thrown out the 2 Bridgegate convictions.
You're kidding me. You know what? Actually, I'm not really surprised, Tim.
No.
I'm not surprised, because that was widely as well viewed as a political prosecution. And I argued that Chris Christie, if it wasn't Donald Trump, Chris Christie had a very working class message for those who didn't follow that campaign. He was a perfect candidate to run in New Jersey. Tim will tell you, for years, I used to argue, I even flirted with it myself. I used to argue the right Republican could absolutely win the state of New Jersey. The
Supreme Court threw out a pair of public corruption convictions in the New Jersey scandal known as Bridgegate, ruling a political retribution scheme to cripple a borough with traffic jams did not constitute federal fraud.
Well, There you have it, folks.
More to come. That's a Wall Street Journal article.
And I'm not even sure that they really established that Christie knew it. The point of the matter, and I wouldn't be surprised if he did, but they did not establish that. Although, again, because I know about New Jersey politics, I know how it goes. I wouldn't be shocked. But they needed to take out Chris Christie. He was a very strong candidate. He didn't win the Republican nomination. Somebody called Donald Trump came along and he out Christied him, But the fact of the matter is, had Donald Trump not gotten that race and had Chris Christie earned the Republican nomination, Hillary Clinton would have had a lot of problems. That man won re-election. That man won re-election with huge numbers of the black vote, huge numbers of the Hispanic vote. He got what's his name's endorsement, and then the other.
He got Brian Stack's endorsement.
That's it.
In Union
it's over.
City.
It's over. Tell them, Tim. It's over. Once that happened, it was over that day.
Yes.
That man. Tell them a little bit for people who don't know. Tell them a little bit about Stack.
I'm not. A friend of mine is an expert on it, and we've talked to him on the phone before. Rich, Justin, the guy I worked with, but
right.
Look, Brian Stack is the mayor of Union City, New Jersey. It is a very large, very densely populated suburb of New York City, just north of Hoboken, borders big stretches of Jersey City. It's probably 80%, 75 to 80% Hispanic community. But a mix of Cuban, Colombian, Dominican, and et cetera. And Brian Stack just has a political machine there that is second to none.
Yep.
State of New Jersey.
He can get out that vote, man.
He's the mayor of Union City, and he is a member of the New Jersey legislature. So now that's grandfathered in. There are very strange things that happen in politics in New Jersey.
Welcome to Jersey.
Yeah. Right. In fact, when Brendan Byrne, who the Meadowlands Arena was named after at one point in time, was ailing, and he knew he only had he had been the governor in New Jersey. One of the big arenas was named after him. He was very famously speaking at a big political event in New Jersey at some point in time. And he said that when he passed away, he wanted to be buried in Hudson County so he could continue to be active in New Jersey politics.
Wow.
But Chris Christie got Brian Stack to endorse him. Brian Stack told all of his people, okay, we're going to vote Democrat all the way down the ballot, except for this governor's race. We're voting for Governor Christie.
Right.
Chris Christie, I think, won the vote in Hudson County, which has just never happened for a Republican before. The first visit that Chris Christie made 1 or 2 days after the election was to visit Brian Stack.
It was, it was such a big deal to get that endorsement. Such a big deal. I mean, really such a big deal. And there was some talk about whether Brian would get involved in that senator's race.
He is not a fan of Bob Menendez.
He doesn't like Bob Menendez.
Really say that publicly.
That's right.
But
there's history
for anybody that wants to spend a couple hours on Google, there's a long history there.
Yeah, there's one of the commenters just said my Democratic
Bob Menendez war. It's a public story. I'm not, spreading rumors. Bob Menendez, when he was either a congressperson or I don't know if he was mayor of Union City or not, he wore a wire and put away.
He finked on his mentor.
Brian Stack's mentor, who had been a long time mayor of Union City.
That's right.
And even the way politics works in Hudson County and Union City, I can't. This guy's name escapes me. Even after he was convicted and before he went to jail, his name was still on the ballot for re-election for his 5th or 6th term as mayor of Union City, and he won the vote. Obviously, didn't serve the term because he was in jail. He went to jail, but that you just can't make that stuff up.
You can't. It's New Jersey, folks. That's Jersey for you.
Right.
And honestly, I'll be a little bit honest here. I'm always honest, but I'll be a little, real. There's parts of things about New Jersey that I do miss quite a bit, and just there's some things that go on in Jersey, folks, that you will never see anywhere else. It's a different kind of place. Bob Menendez finked on Brian's mentor, and he couldn't stand him. So in the 2018 Senate election, he was kind of sitting it out. Menendez, for a time there, was in a lot of trouble. We had that race. You remember him? Close as
I think there was some funny stuff going on.
I think well,
because that race should not
have been a blowout.
As a wide margin as it turned out to be. It just didn't make a lot of sense.
I totally agree. It should have been closer, but it wasn't a full-throated. It was more like Brian Stagg ignored the race instead of gave anybody a full-throated endorsement.
Yeah.
And but going back to where does this all go, though? If you go back to 2016, had Chris Christie been the nominee, they were in a lot of trouble. So I'm not shocked to hear that was thrown out. It's almost like one of those things, Tim, where the purpose wasn't to prosecute those people anyway. The purpose was to cripple Chris Christie politically.
Right.
Somebody in the comments before said their Democratic sister admitted that they would have voted for Christie over Hillary Clinton. I'll tell you what, I have family that that are Democrats. They live in Jersey. They loved Chris Christie. They loved him. They absolutely would have voted for Chris Christie over Hillary Clinton, and that would have been like everywhere. I mean, but in the end, he didn't get the nomination. So my argument, which I wrote about a long time ago, was a moot point. I was kind of like backing Kurt Schlichter back then, where he would say, listen, Tea Party has gotten smeared. It's got a bad name now. You can either look for the most Tea Party-like candidate and lose, or you can back Chris Christie, who is a different kind of Republican, and win. And back then, Donald Trump wasn't even really he just wasn't in the game yet. And I wrote an article that using what I do with data and to back that up. Chris Christie had an appeal that ended up being a lot like the Trump appeal. Working class that voted for Obama that would not have voted for Hillary Clinton, or at least you could have taken from Hillary Clinton. So in the end, the analysis still stood. It just was a different candidate. Now let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at this poll. So basically, they've polled this several times in the past, and now nearly half of, I'll read it almost verbatim, nearly half of likely voters, it's on PPD in the election and polling area. Nearly half of likely voters believe senior federal law enforcement officials broke the law to prevent Donald Trump from winning the presidency. Moreover, a majority of Republicans would like to see James Comey prosecuted for it. So the Rasmussen Reports national and phone and online survey finds 63% of Republicans believe the law was broken in a conspiracy against the president, to include 48% who say it's very likely. The same is true of 39% of Democrats and 42% of voters not affiliated with either major party. Overall, 48% of voters believe that federal law enforcement officials at the FBI and the Justice Department broke the law. That compares, folks, to just 32% who said that when they first asked this question a little over 2 years ago. It's down only slightly from 51 and 50% in June 2018 and February 2018, when this was actually in the news. The media has done a very good job of apologizing for these new damning headlines that have been coming up. They apologize, they cover up for it, and they flatly ignore it. These latest stories, absolutely, because Russia is not the big deal right now, like it used to be, that it's not making its way, and alternative media is kind of carrying these stories on their back. So it's striking to me that it's only fallen 3 points, Tim, or 2, depending on which survey you compare it to. But the high is 51. The other time was 50. Now we're at 48 after the Flynn revelations. And there are more revelations, which we're going to talk about later in the show. But alternative media and a little bit on Fox is the only way that that voters are going to hear about this. If you turn on MSNBC, if you turn on CNN, if you turn on NBC, ABC, CBS, they're going to either apologize for it, mock it, or just flatly cover up and lie to you about what the evidence shows. And the poll results come as newly unsealed documents and text messages provided the clearest and most damning evidence against the Federal Bureau of Investigation set up from former National Security Advisor Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. Overall, voters are evenly split on whether the former fired FBI director should be criminally prosecuted. Nearly 4 in 10 overalls, 39% say that he should, but 40%, 1 point, disagree. 1/5, 20%, Tim, are undecided. So this is an important time for the president and his supporters to make this case. As more evidence comes out, you have 1/5 of the electorate out there.
Yes.
That don't know what to think about this story. Go get them.
I would go back to that big.
Oh, I would hammer it over and over and over again. By party, it's a little different. This actually underscores the point we're trying to make here. While 54% of Republicans want James Comey prosecuted, that only compares to 31% of Democrats, which I thought honestly was a little high, but you never know, and 32% of voters unaffiliated. So you have this huge chunk of the electorate that you could convince here. You know what I mean? That you could go after. And it's a big deal. This is before anything with William Barr comes out, Tim.
I think that Comey's, this clip that they've been playing again, not as if they didn't play it 100 times,
right,
2.5 years ago, of Comey interviewing with Nicole Wallace, and she's asking about how was it that these FBI agents ended up in the White House 4 days into the administration. He said, well, I sent them. I thought it was the perfect time for them to go there, given how chaotic the new administration was. Well, every new administration is chaotic the first month. But I think that interview, that clip, is very bad for him.
Yeah, I mean, what it shows is that, number one, he had knowledge of it. It just wasn't lower agents in the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. He had knowledge of it. And also, it's pretty clear what
for a guy that was director of the FBI, you would have thought that he would have been a little bit more careful the way he answered that question.
I know. I just don't, you would. But again, these people really did think that Donald Trump was going to be, first, they thought they could prevent it. And then secondly, they thought they'd find something on him, Tim, to remove him. The plan was to get the Senate as well. Impeachment would have gone through. We can see that now from the strict party line votes. If they would have had a true wave, folks, and I need to put this to bed. A true wave. 2018 was not a blue wave. A true wave is when a party will really sweep through both chambers of commerce and state and local elections. There were too many states. There were too many Senate seats. There were too many legislator districts where what we really saw, like take Virginia, for instance, Republicans ended up losing control of the House of Burgess. That was more that because state legislatures are a lagging indicator when it comes to the shift of a state. So you'll first see it on statewide races, such as, and particularly national, where you'll see it on the presidential and the senatorial level. And then later you'll start to see it in the gubernatorial levels and then in the state legislatures. Why? Because incumbency matters, because locality matters. And we had a lot of retirements, Republican retirements in 2018. We saw a historic number of Republican retirements. If it was a true wave, you would have saw people like Bill Nelson hold his seat. If it was a true wave, Joe Donnelly probably could have even held his seat. We saw Republicans buck that trend in a lot of places. They lost 2 more seats overall net, 2 more seats in the Senate. And in states like Connecticut, Bob Stefanowski almost defeated Democratic incumbent governor. Almost. Also very close, which I know Tim doesn't. Tim, I bet you'd argue something happened there too. I mean, that race was over. Bob was going to. That race was over, man. And then,
look, when both political camps expected the other guy to win, you know that there was some funny stuff going on.
And then you had ballot harvesting. The impact, you can't really be understated. I mean, it's legal out there, but the impact of ballot harvesting in California. We have
what's the over under on how many seats that cost?
Right. 4? Yeah. 4? I mean, look at Kim, young Kim.
Right.
I mean, she was sworn in as a freshman congresswoman and then had to leave because she lost the election weeks after it was already.
She's probably going to win this time, right?
Well, we'll see if the ballot
allegedly has a very, very large lead right now.
There's 2 districts where I could tell you Republicans have a nice sizable lead in California. But again, we don't know during a presidential election what the impact of that will be. And then again, to put it to bed, if it was a true blue wave and it was a bad night for Republicans, I'm not minimizing. It was a bad night.
Right.
But a wave would have carried into other areas of the government and definitely both chambers of Congress. That did not happen. Democrats ended up winning a slightly average higher number of seats for a first term incumbent midterm. And Tim, if you take those 4, let's be generous and say 4 seats in California, if you take that off that total, then it's roughly average. That's what I mean by slightly higher than average in the past. And I'm talking about modern elections throughout the 20th century. And we put this up there for people. You can see it going back to, I don't even know. I mean, we're talking at least 80 years worth of data. And they wound up losing an above average number of seats for the upper chamber. That's not a true wave. It's just not. And by the way, Donald Trump had a lot to do with it. He single-handedly saved the United States Senate for the Republican Party. People know me. I'm not a Trump thumper, but that is absolutely true. We were polling those races. Some of those Republicans were either going to lose or it was close. And then Trump would go around the country and bounce them by 6 points. It was incredible. It was really incredible. And interestingly, Tim, in states like Nevada and other areas, it was interesting. Trump's approval rating was above 50% by the time it got to that election. Arizona, another one, I think it was 54. In Nevada, it was 52. In North Carolina, it was 52. And I mean, it was just incredible that he just, he can only do so much on his own. Let's wrap up this poll, though, real quick, just to say, I did wrap it up. So let's end it. Let's move on to the next thing. We're going to do our, real quick announcement time before we do our market update. I'm going to be on American Countdown tonight at 8:30 with Robert Barnes. I'll tweet it out. All right. I'll tweet it out throughout the day. And then right before I go on, that's going to be interesting. We're going to talk about my little segment yesterday about Mr. Murray and his model being a fraud, because he is a fraud. And we'll talk about a ton of other things, no doubt, polling and whatnot. But it was a lot of fun last time. I was wiped out last time, Tim. I was up for 38 hours straight or something the last time I went on a show. It's a new show. So,
oh, God.
Man. And I was trying so hard. I was like, I'm headed back to the office to get in front of the green screen. And Laura's like, here's the coffee. I don't even like extra sugar. I don't even like a lot of sugar, And she's like, wake up. Because I was totally exhausted, And then I got there. I got the interview done, and I went home and I passed out. Today I'm going to be uppity. So it'll be interesting. So let's do the market update. And then when we come back, we will look at the census data on educated voters before we move into the pundit's perspective. Speaking of the FBI, because we're going to circle back to that story. There's more coming out. There's just some more that came out today with George Papadopoulos, Tim, So what are you laughing at comments over there?
I'm laughing at something I'm being texted manically by a couple different people in the media. I'm not going to mention their names.
Yeah.
This article in Politico last night on Kelly Loeffler recusing herself from the agriculture panel, distancing herself from stock issues. I don't know. I was just looking at the article now. There's one absolutely hysterical statement in it. And it's a big topic of conversation in New York, even though it's a Georgia Senate seat, because she is the wife of Jeff Sprecher, who owns ICE, Intercontinental Exchange, and owns the New York Stock Exchange.
Can't make it up.
So, from someone on, from a spokesman for Doug Collins, who is probably the guy that's going to win that primary.
Yeah, it's looking pretty damning for her.
In this Politico article, and you should read this later, it says, I'll just read this real quick. It is now abundantly clear that the media and her adversaries will stop at, I'm screwing this up.
Go ahead, though. Just take it because I want to hear it. Go ahead.
So her staffer says it's now abundantly clear the media and her adversaries will stop at nothing to attack her and take away the important work doing during the public health care crisis. The senator continues to serve on the full agricultural committee, and her focus remains on delivering results for Georgia's farmers, blah, 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 blah. So
she's not going anywhere?
Someone, I don't know if this is Doug Collins, probably one of his spokespeople says, what about the Agricultural Committee, the Joint Economic Committee, the U.S. Senate? Asked Dan McLaughlin, Collins' spokesperson. She has 5 conflicts of interest before her first Kai latte every day.
Oh, my God.
And her campaign is starting to look like a Saturday Night Live sketch.
Oh, my God. You know what?
They're not going to let up on her. They're not going to let up on her. They've got her on defense. No. And they're just gonna attack every day for a month. I think that primary is June 9th.
Also breaking on that race, Karen Handel. If you remember, she beat Ross off in the special election, then had her seat taken from her too, which that was Georgia 5, right? That was Newt's old seat. It was first Tom Price. It was used to be an R plus 20 something.
Right.
Was represented by Newt Gingrich. She lost it. Also funny stuff going on out there. But I mean, look, she should have won it, but very well liked actually by Republicans.
Is she running again?
No, man, she's backing Doug Collins against Kelly Loeffler.
Oh, good.
Oh, my God. Kelly's going down.
Yeah.
She's going down. The last bit of polling that I've seen was a total blowout. And it took the Republican National Senatorial Committee, all right, the NS.
Are they still officially supporting her?
Yes, they are, and which is amazing.
It is.
And they were saying, Doug Collins is going to put his seat by doing this. He's selfish. He's going to put his seat in Georgia at risk, which is ridiculous. It is
that's a safe
seat, and he's going to put the Senate seat at risk. Folks, we've been down this road before. All right. If you cannot get your base out, you will lose. McSally was supposed to be the better candidate versus Kelly Ward in Arizona to go against Kirsten Sinema. I submit to you that Kelly Ward would have gotten a bigger base vote in Maricopa County. I'm telling you, I believe that 100%. We'll never know because they once again took it from Kelly Ward, but McSally was the appointed senator.
She won that primary pretty handily.
Yes, she did. But that's because they pulled what they pull, which is, Kelly Ward can't win. Kelly Ward can't win. Kelly Ward, when she was in and McSally wasn't. So what happened was McSally was appointed to replace John Kyle, very strong candidate, very well liked in Arizona.
Yes, he had been a long-time governor, long-time senator there.
Yes, and he was across the board, very well liked. But then you take him out of the ball game. You put in McSally, who was supposed to be moderate and a military person, a veteran, combat pilot, on paper strong, but a terrible campaigner and weak when it comes to fighting back. She's gotten stronger, but now She has an even stronger opponent now. That's the problem. Mark Kelly's very, very, very strong. But had Kelly Ward, who was way ahead of Jeff Flake when McSally wasn't in the picture, way ahead. She was going to embarrass Jeff Flake, and that's why he left.
If Jeff Flake hadn't said he wasn't going to run for re-election, then McSally never would have run, and Kelly Ward would have beat him in the primary.
That's right. And that's what happened. They chased Flake out of the race because Flake was going to go down in a blaze of glory, just like it looks like Kelly Loeffler is going to go down. The difference is here is that you'll get the candidate that the base, that the activists, that the voters that you can count on, they want him. They don't want Kelly Loeffler. They want Doug Collins. He defended the president tooth and nail against every hoax they've thrown at him. They want, you cannot excite your base with a candidate like Kelly Loeffler. At this point, I would also submit she's going to get creamed among independents in Georgia. If she's the candidate, she's going to lose. And that's a state that is Republican advantage. We've been down that road before.
I don't think we're going to have to worry about that.
I don't think we're going to have to even worry about that, man. I think Doug is going to clobber her at this point. You cannot have somebody who's been that credibly accused of insider trading. And I've been through her trades. The only one I see is Burr. That looks disgusting. He should resign immediately. But anyway, you know, Matt Gaetz is right about that. Power to my Floridian brother. He's absolutely right. That's hypocritical. So hypocritical. But the bottom line is this will be different. They'll get the race that they get here. Kelly Loeffler's husband is what makes that look so ugly. And that is going to be a really easy case for Democrats to make. And so, you know, very easy case. And I definitely could see the state of Georgia voting for a Democrat over somebody like Kelly Loeffler. I can. Now, can I see them doing it over Doug Collins? No, because if Donald Trump carries the state, they're going to have that very strong defend our president vote that every incumbent gets. It's going to be very strong. And we've been over the voter files. The race was close in 2018, but they still lost. Stacey Abrams still lost, even though she drastically increased the African-American vote. We've been over it. I'll pull the maps back up for people who want to argue with me on this again. She had all the stars align, and she still lost. It had nothing to do with voter suppression. African Americans were a far greater vote share, and they voted in heavier margins for her. She just lost because Georgia is a tough state for Democrats to win. Okay, Tim, let's do a market update. When we come back, we will look at the census numbers, and then we will the educated voter, the truth about educated voters, and then we'll look at we'll do the pundit's perspective. What's going on out there?
I'm just going to sound like a broken record, but we're pretty much where we've been since the first half hour of trading. The Dow is up 1.25%. We're within 50 points of 24,000. The S&P 500 is up maybe just a touch less than that, but still very close to that 2,900 level. We're within 15 points of 2,900 at 28.85 on the S&P 500. And the NASDAQ is at 89.60, up 1.3%, within 40 points of the 9,000 level for NASDAQ. It has not closed above that level since the first few days of the decline in very early March. It would definitely be a headline-grabbing event for the NASDAQ to go through that 9,000 level.
Okay. All right. That's good stuff.
Do your promo thing, and I'll be back in a minute.
Oh yeah, I didn't even tell people. And while I do, right before we get into the truth about the trend behind the educated voters, you know, for those of you just popping on, if you are looking on Facebook, don't forget to like the page, People's Pundit Daily. If you're looking on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel and then give us those thumbs up. We're trying to hit those metrics, and we want to hit them. Also, if you guys are on Periscope, I shot that link out to YouTube. Just give us those hearts before you go over there. But YouTube is a better stream. So many people are home. It's just Periscope gets bogged down. That's what we hear. And for some of you who don't have Periscope or don't, you know, you watch on Scope because maybe you're not on Facebook anymore and you're not on YouTube. There's always, this is always running live on People's Pundit Daily. It's always free. It's not behind the paywall. At least it is right now. And So you could always watch it on People's Pundit Daily. The ultimate way to support the show before we get into the segment is to subscribe to People's Pundit Daily. That's how we bring you the show. That's how we sponsor the polls. That's how we bring you guys all these cool graphics and giant databases of voter files, among other things. And you could do that by going to peoplespunditdaily.com, finding one of the digital subscriptions and choosing one that's right for you. Or you could just take the short link, which is pbdnews.us/subscribe. pbdnews.us/subscribe. And for those of you who don't want a monthly or annual commitment, we even have credit tier subscriptions where you could sign up if you just want to read a single article. All right, let's get into the truth about the hi Nancy. I'll say it back to you guys sometimes. Once in a while, I'll see something like that. I'll blurt it out. Let's get into the truth behind the trend in educated voters. The media narrative is that Donald Trump, because he is who he is, the suburbs, are going against him. They're not voting for Republicans like they voted for Mitt Romney and that kind of Republican Party. That educated voters are not voting for Republicans because of Donald Trump and like they used to for the party behind Mitt Romney, the more establishment wing of the Republican Party. And I'm telling you, there is a very big difference between a suburban voter and a metro suburban voter. There's a very big difference from the educated voter of 2010 and 14 that Republicans did well among than there is between them and the educated voter of 2016, 18, and 2020. And when we get the new census, we're going to get an even clearer picture on this. But we can simply look at the joint preliminary data released by the Census Bureau and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Okay? Before we get into my bullet point, this is why the Labor Department jumped on this, Tim. All right? Here's a graph. I took it right from them. All right. In the labor force participation by level of education among population age 25 and older, you can clearly see that the share of the vote in the share of the labor force from people who do not have a high school are not high school graduates is on the decline and has been now over the last 10 years. You can clearly see those who have some college or an associate degree are ticking down and has been on the decline since 2010. You can clearly see that those who have a high school education or an equivalent, which means like a GED, are just now starting to arrest that trend. Trump, this went through 2019, so Trump had arrested a lot of these trends that got him elected. I mean, look at 2016. Look where the working man and woman was. They collapsed. And then you can clearly see those who have a bachelor degree or higher have either, and you got to keep in mind some of that impact of the recession too, Tim, and the change in how the economy during the Trump era, but they've basically flatlined and are actually now beginning to tick up. That is simple. The reason for that is simple. Let's go through a couple bullet statistics. Hopefully you guys can see this, okay? This is what the U.S. Labor Department and the U.S. Census Bureau and the Bureau of Labor Statistics have found. This is over from 2010 to 2019. Almost 50% of foreign-born who arrived in the United States over the past decade had college degrees, a higher rate than both earlier foreign-born and native-born Americans. An estimated 47.4% of foreign-born who arrived in the U.S. from 2010 to 2019 had a bachelor's degree or higher, compared to 36.3% of native-born Americans and 31.5% of foreign-born who entered the country in or before 2009. In 2019, 39.4% of naturalized citizens and 40.2% of children of foreign-born in the United States had bachelor's degrees or higher. That compares to 35.9% of those born to native-born parents. A greater share, 14.1%, of foreign-born than native-born at 13.4%, also held advanced degrees such as a master's or doctorate. I know this is getting heavy, folks, and I know I put up a lot here, but it's important.
In 2019, high school was the highest level of education completed by only 28.1% of the population 25 and older, and 22.5% finished 4 years of college. From 2010 to 2019, the percentage of people 25 and older with a bachelor's degree or higher jumped from 29.9 to 36.0. What this is telling you is the native-born education level is not going anywhere. In fact, it's going down. But somehow, the percentage of people who are 25 and older with a bachelor's degree or higher still increased by just over 6 points over the last 10 years. What you could basically conclude by this, guys, without getting into the final last two, what you can conclude by this, from these statistics, is that we're importing our educated vote. Over the last 10 years, we're importing our educated vote. It is less a domestic vote. And I'm not saying that, look, this is not about, I'm not making a point here about immigration. We're strictly talking about the numbers. They say what they say. It has nothing to do with your ideology. In the past decade, the rate of labor force participation within the population 25 and older fell for all educated groups except those who had not completed high school, whose rate really wasn't statistically different. Labor force participation fell 3.1% for people with a bachelor's degree or more. It fell by 5.1% among those with some college or an associate degree, and by 4.5% for those who completed a high school. All right, so labor force participation includes people who are employed or unemployed, but excludes people who are retired, taking care of home or family, or otherwise not participating in the labor market. In 2019, 40%, just 40.1% of non-Hispanic whites 25 and older had a bachelor's degree or higher. That's up from 33.2% in 2010. During the same period, the percentage of blacks 25 and older with a bachelor's degree or higher rose from 19.8% to 26.1%. Asians, which was already high, still ticked up about 6 points from 52.4 to 58.1, and Hispanics from 13.9 to 18.8. All right. Again, where I'm going with this, are we really looking at the same vote? I mean, Tim, what are your thoughts on this? Just from reading that aloud. The point of this segment is, are we looking at the same vote? I mean, we're not looking at the same vote.
Well, no, it's always changing a little bit. I mean, there's always demographic dynamics that shift and have some fluidity to them. Now, look, I would say that it depends, I think, to some degree, where those educated voters are coming from. I think that, for instance, the educated voters that came here from Eastern Europe in the 90s were very pro-Republican. We're very pro-Republican voters because they basically viewed Ronald Reagan and Thatcher as having been primarily responsible for taking down the Berlin Wall and crushing the Soviet Union, which resulted in the breakup of what had been the Soviet Union.
Right.
And there were significant amounts of educated people that came from Eastern European countries. I think they were largely Republican voters. I'm just saying that from those that I knew. I don't know that I've ever seen any hard polling data on it.
Yeah, that's why
I would say that if these educated voters are coming from India, and I know that there are a lot of H-1B Indian workers in the state of New Jersey, although a lot of people would say that they are typically vote Democrat. I mean, look at the response that Trump got when there was the big event for Modi in Houston that had 50,000 naturalized Indian people there. And look at the response that he got when he went to India.
Yeah.
Now, these people come here and study, and they're told by their parents, basically, that you're studying. If you go there to study, you're studying math, science, technology, or something very close to that. None of this social sciences, basket weaving, humanities nonsense.
Domestic
So,
Americans.
I mean, I would just think that those when they become
Native born.
educated voters, that I would just think that they are pro-capitalist, economic responsibility at a personal level, which is going to feed into being much more likely to be a conservative voter than a liberal voter, especially with what being a liberal voter in today's world means.
Yeah, I think there's two things here, Tim, that are worth noting. I think that the percentage of native-born Americans that has increased from non-college to college, or really more than that. I mean, it's bachelor's or higher, really, is the one you're really looking at. Republicans don't do they don't do poorly among people with a bachelor degree. And especially if you look at a state like Wisconsin, Trump did actually very well among them. Where they really get hairy is graduate or higher, an advanced degree. But the census, you have to parse that out because they lump that all together. I think two things are happening. The native born is that population that's getting more educated tend to be liberal demographics. And then, of course, they go and they get liberalized in schools like that. I mean, that's a talking point from
it's an indoctrination process.
And it's absolutely true. And then the second thing is, where are they coming from? India has now started to take a back seat to Asian countries like China that are far less friendly to the Republican message. So I think that could be a lot. And we won't know. It would be a fascinating study for someone to commission that. I would love to do that. I really would.
Right.
Just looking at educated people, just looking at people with a bachelor's degree or higher. I would love to get into something like that. Maybe I'll even look into doing that. But without doing it, it's hard to know some of what I suspect for sure. But it wasn't back in the 90s. There wasn't this push. I mean, it's an actual agenda by countries like China to use our education system. And Asians were a more Republican vote in the 90s. I'm trying to be careful here. They are less likely now to assimilate the way they were before.
Right.
So now they're more pragmatic as far as their own nationalism goes. They do and they're nationalists, Tim. They're not, but not when they come here is what I mean. And there's less of that percentage is less Indian than it was, and now it's more Asian and less Republican friendly demographics. Go look at the exit polls from Bush v. Gore with the Asian vote. It was far more. There was a point where the Asian vote was Republican, and it's not now. That's a relatively modern phenomenon. In the 90s, it was. It was, and it's not now. So it's just like a different group of people. And then, of course, we have a lot of our social desirability pressures here. So even if you weren't somebody who was, tended to lean left, when you get into that world, it's filled with leftists. So it's very, you know what I mean? Like,
look, yes.
If you come into a white upper crust liberal socialite society from a foreign country, the social pressure must be huge. I'm just trying to think about this practically.
Look, if I just look at what just an astounding job Trump did with getting the blue collar vote and speaking to those people on their terms, not like I'm going to help you, but like he could speak to them, even though he was a quote unquote Manhattan billionaire. He could speak to them in a very common language, almost speaking to them on their terms, almost as if he was one of them. I mean, some people would say he speaks in a fifth grade language. Well, you know what? 90% of the people in the country speak in a fifth grade language. Okay. So he was very, very successful at making those people feel very, very comfortable with him, to the point where they felt, I don't care how much money the guy's got. Where Mitt Romney tried to hide his money and not talk about his money, Trump talks about how rich he is and how successful he's been, and he still won that vote.
Yeah, he's
what that's also going to do. What that's also going to do is, among highly educated people, they're going to say, "This guy talks like a buffoon."
Yeah, I will say too, somebody said, for some reason, I feel like people, the bachelors and higher, particularly in the suburbs and urban areas, seem to be susceptible to social pressure on deciding who to vote for. And the Republicans have to figure out a way to do that. You know, there used to be this idea like Republicans were the party of the rich and big business and that socialite club area. That has changed. And Tim, as you know, as a broker as a trader in New York City for decades, that was never really true, right? I mean, those upper crust people were always liberals. They were, or at least they were liberals.
The whole C-suite among Wall Street firms and big banks is probably 75% Democrats.
That's right.
But I think that a lot of the just working people that grew up, you know, working in the back office and then working their way into a trading situation or working their way up through just hard work and taking advantage of opportunities that would come along. You saw a lot more of that certainly in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s than you do now, just because so much of the business has gone, so much of that lower level business has gone electronic that, excuse me, I might have a sneeze here, but they,
I'll cover you.
They have, those people are much more likely to vote Republican. I mean, the one borough in New York City that still votes Republican, that still has probably, I think, a couple of Republican members of the House of Representatives, is Staten Island. And Staten Island is a very blue collar place.
Yeah. My old stomping ground. I have family from Staten Island, which is where I used to live. Scranton Avenue. You know, that was an Italian area right there. And then I have, family from Queens that still live in Queens, and Brooklyn really was the other one. Brooklyn and Staten Island. But Brooklyn is not what it used to be anymore. I mean, Staten Island is still working class.
Well, that was the typical. That was the typical progression for the. I don't know if I should say Italians, but I will. That was the typical progression
maturation, we like to say here.
Maturation. They went from Brooklyn to Staten Island after, of course, they built the Verrazano Bridge in the early 1970s. They went from Brooklyn to Staten Island, and then when they really made it, they went from Staten Island to New Jersey.
Yes, and that was me. That's my
family.
A
two-stage. It was a two-step process.
The exodus. We call it political maturation. I don't know where I got that, but we call that political maturation here. And
I like that.
I got it from
very politically correct term.
It is politically correct. And I wrote a thing I did a whole study on, and then I would want to turn this into a book, but I like to write like heavy book. People always like write about polling and tell your stories, and I probably should do that and probably could actually sell books if I did that, but I don't. I write these like dumb, not dumb, but theory heavy books. And one of them, which I could turn into a book tomorrow, it's so long, I copy and paste it, Tim, was on the political maturation of ethnic Catholics and how Hispanics how basically the point of it is that Republicans lost an opportunity there by allowing them to become supportive of big government programs, which they do because of where they come from. Whereas when the Irish took a lot longer to go through the political maturation process, but than the Italians did. But we even saw that with Puerto Ricans during the World War II era, which was by the way, there was a huge correlation, a very strong correlation between military service and political maturation. And Italians, very high service rates during the Great World War II. Puerto Ricans as well. They were replaced by a new wave of Puerto Ricans that really, the way I put it was, there's no skin. They had no skin in the game. It's just true. They didn't fight for the country. They really had no skin in the game. I mean, it's just a fact. So anyway, I want just to circle back to answer that question. There's actually polling on this, Tim, that when these groups get to this area, Pew Research did it, of all people, they are the least likely to be able to deal with social pressure. And how do we know that? They are the least likely to tolerate other people's views and opinions. They're the least likely to have friends who have other views. I'm talking about liberals and educated liberals and foreign-born people who become part of that class because of the social bias. They're not able to fend off the social bias, and then once they're in it, they become very intolerant. So it's really incredible, because they're the ones who always say, be tolerant. You got to be tolerant of others. They are. I mean, this is borne out by data. It's not my opinion. They are the least tolerant people in this society. Whereas it's completely backward. Those that are portrayed as backward are the more tolerant people. It's incredible. But of all people, Pew has a lot of good stuff on that. That's a whole other segment in of itself. We got to do that. That's a good one, right? That's a good idea. I'm putting that in my list of things to do, because that's an incredible segment. That could make for really good stuff. But to wrap up this one, before we do our next spiel and then update, moving into dereliction of duty by our oversight committees, to wrap this show up today, it's not a different vote. Even if we don't have the specifics, there's a lot more that meets the eye when it comes to the educated vote. So when you hear media say, well, it's the Republican Party, it's Trump, it's this, it's that, we can't even know that, because we don't know. They're not the same. We're comparing apples to oranges. That's really the truth. 10 years is a long time, and there can make a lot of demographic change can happen in a long time. I showed you in the Minnesota voter analysis episode, folks, if you remember that one, just the difference in Minnesota over 10 years, sorry, from 2010 to now. Or actually, it was that chart too, went back a little further, because I originally started it in 2016 when we were polling Minnesota. So I went back to do research on the state to try to make sure I was going to accurately, get that electorate right demographically. So it's not the same group of people. So as usual, the media is too superficial, because half of them are simpletons and the other half don't know they're simpletons, or at least some of them are very smart. But when it comes to this side of that business, Tim, they're not as smart as they think they are, and they definitely don't want you to know half of this crap too, which is sad, but that's why we're doing the show. All right, let's go through the spiel, do our market update, and then head into the new stuff we have on G-Pop. All right. So it is 11:33, almost 11:34. You're watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I am the People's Pundit, Rich Barris. You guys can follow me on Twitter at Peoples_Pundit if you don't already. I'm followed by Tim the Source Anderson, and you can follow him at TJ Anderson1 on Twitter, at TJ Anderson1. If you guys are watching on YouTube today, don't forget to subscribe. Do it now before you forget. Like the video, give us those little thumbs up. We're trying to hit that metric starting this from scratch, and we're getting there. Let's make a nice little pop. Let's get there sooner rather than later. You guys are doing a great job. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, people that you think may find it interesting. If you're watching on Facebook Live,
subscribe to or like the page, People's Pundit Daily. If you do one or either on YouTube and Facebook, then it will notify you before we go live. This way you don't have to scrounge to get to us and don't miss anything in the beginning. And then, of course, the ultimate way to subscribe to the show is how we bring you inside the numbers, how we sponsor polling and everything else, is to subscribe to People's Pundit Daily. And you can do that by going to ppdnews.us/subscribe. ppdnews.us/subscribe. That's the short link. You could also just go to peoplespunditdaily.com and find the digital subscriptions. For those of you who have done it, we love you for it. Since we started the show, believe me, we see it. We love you. We appreciate it. All right, Tim, what's going on with the market update before we circle back?
Markets are at their highs of the day. The Dow is up 1.5%. It's just through the 24,000 level, up 350 points. The NASDAQ is just scratching at that 9,000 level. It's about 30 points away. And the S&P is just about 10 or 12 points from the 2,900 level. So I just think that, there were some jittery points this week from time to time. You had some saber rattling between China and the U.S. over trade and who was responsible for the virus. You had some high-profile bankruptcies in the retail sector. You clearly have tremendous downside wave of raw economic data that was not unexpected from the self-imposed government shutdown that we went through. But we also have some signs of encouragement from states beginning to reopen, more businesses beginning to come back online. And as we accelerate that over the next 2 to 3 weeks, it will be very interesting to see how many businesses are saying, well, we're kind of ready to go, but we need to get our workers back. And how many of them say, well, you know what? We're back. Our workers got back here within 1 or 2 days because we had them on this PPP program. So they were really still on our payrolls and everything. So that would really bear some fruit from the PPP program if we start to hear comments like that. And look, we're going to get unemployment numbers tomorrow that are going to be
ugly,
probably a mirror image of what we saw from ADP on Wednesday. But I don't think the market's going to be, it's in the market. As they say, it's in the market. It's not the headlines that the market's going to react to. It's the headlines in comparison to the expectations.
Just so people know, it's the consensus range for tomorrow is a low of 30 million job losses to a high of 8.6 million. And the consensus forecast is for a loss of 21.5 million jobs. It's
Right.
going to be the range is ugly as hell to really beep ugly. Okay.
Yeah.
But it is
Right.
what it is. And I actually, the longer this goes on, Tim, the more we'll see you trading on the data. That's the way I felt about this. But for right now, like you said, I really do think it is in the market for now. I do. For now, we'll see. But okay, let's get into, and one quick again, for those who missed it before, tonight I'll be on American Countdown with Robert Barnes at 8:30. Don't miss it. I'll share the link and it'll be a good time. Let's get in to our new little lovely segment called The Pundit's Perspective. We're derelict in our oversight duties here, Tim. We're in a really dangerous spot. We have a bipartisan committee in the Senate Intelligence Committee. And then we have a completely partisan Democrat-controlled Intelligence Committee in the House. Adam Schiff is a crook. I'm not even going to entertain anything else here. The guy is a crook. He's a scumbag. He's a liar. He's probably the biggest liar and crook in the District of Columbia, which really says something because that place is a cesspool of filth. And we're in a dangerous place to have a man like that in control of the role over the main role for the people to oversee
to have some kind of oversight over what are very powerful agencies that could do a lot of damage to Americans. If they can do it to a man like Donald Trump, folks, they sure as hell can do it to you. The Inspector General a couple of weeks ago released a report. We reported on it. The FISA program is being abused far worse than anybody previously thought, except for me and a few others. And I mean, we've talked about this. I told you guys a million times, if you think this is only Donald Trump, you're nuts. This is the OIG, Michael Horowitz. I know a lot of people are frustrated with him that are Trump supporters, but agree or disagree, his reputation is of being a pretty stand-up guy, right?
Yes.
Both sides of the aisle. And he pulled his punch a little bit when it came to Crossfire Hurricanes report. But for the most part, he still put the facts in the report.
He put the facts out there.
He put the facts out there.
Without big splashy headlines.
Yes, without saying, I conclude this was a political persecution against Donald Trump and other people around Donald Trump. All right. That he pulled that punch, but he still put the damning facts of the case in his report. I would argue the report after that was even worse on the Woods procedures and whether they follow it and whether they don't, which they don't. We've reported, we've reported that it's not just political actors. There are companies that have grievances against the government with FISA, people who are supposed to be contracted with the FBI, contracted with the DOD, and the government using FISA to circumvent their intellectual property, steal it from them, and cut them loose so they don't have to pay them for it. It's disgusting. I mean, it's way beyond, we make jokes and say J. Edgar Comey. This is way beyond J. Edgar Comey stuff. I mean, what Comey did was in the mold of Hoover, what we were talking about before, that meeting that you talked about, and then that setup, that using a defensive briefing as a setup. But we were talking a lot about Carter Page and Michael Flynn. And I want to give credit to the Daily Caller here because the credit does go to the Daily Caller. Chuck Ross at the Daily Caller has a story up now about George Papadopoulos knowing 100% who the Fink was that the FBI got to rat on or try to spy and rat on him. Really, it's worse than that, Tim, because it's not even entrapment. It's like a setup and a frame job, because it's beyond entrapment when you try to get somebody. Entrapment is to try to get someone to commit a crime. But when that fails, and then not only is it failed, but you have exculpatory evidence that the man is innocent, he's not involved in any of these things, and then you just keep going. You want him to be involved. I'll buy you a burner phone, okay? I mean, first of all, I'm going to identify this guy because I want everyone to know his name, because he is a scumbag. His name is Jeffrey Weissman, and he is an old college buddy of George Papadopoulos. And the FBI goes to him, and there are some conversations. George Papadopoulos is now thinking back and saying, at first I was concerned about it because I thought the guy was a friend. I thought I known him, and he calls him up frantic one day and he says, "Oh man, what's going on with you? The FBI was here. They were asking me all sorts of questions about you." And he now realizes that this was just a fraud, a setup, right?
Yeah.
So let's look at one of the text messages. Okay. Here's one of them. All right. "Do you want me to get you a burner phone from South Carolina?" And he laughs at it. And he's like, "What are you talking about, man?" "I'll pay cash and I'll get it from a random gas station so you can't be traced." Hold on, let me stop.
It's
seriously, right? He says, I mean, folks, the FBI put him up to this to try to get George Papadopoulos to do something wrong. Not that they suspected him of doing something wrong. In fact, there is a transcript, and this is the transcript that George Papadopoulos, when they saw, he realized it was Weissman, okay? Because now, I mean, he knows who he talked to, and they had several people on this kid. Several people on this kid. I mean, I can't believe someone, and I don't mean, look, George, I don't mean to call you a kid, but you're a kid by my standard, all right? He has no experience in this world at all. And I'm stunned at the length the FBI and Justice Department and the CIA, by the way, helped, the length to which they went to to try to entrap and snare, set up these people. I'm shocked that like some of them, they didn't do something stupid, right, Tim? Aren't you a little shocked? Because before I send this next one,
for all the alleged brilliance and sophistication and experience at the upper levels of the FBI, could they have picked two worse people to try to use
Stephen Alper
to try to entrap the George Papadopoulos, who was like given $10,000 in cash somewhere in Italy, but didn't take it with him on the plane back to the States. Instead, gave the cash to his attorney in Greece and said, I'm not going to travel with this. You better hold this for me. And then Carter Page, who's a little bit of an odd guy. Okay. But he's a very smart guy, very disciplined, testified, I think at least twice, either publicly or behind closed doors.
Behind closed doors, both.
Without an attorney. And he said, I think I'm okay with this. I think I've got this. And they couldn't have struck out more than they did with those two guys, trying to use them to get to the next level within the Trump campaign.
And from what we have heard, Brennan is kind of like hand selected Carter Page as like a target. They had a file on Carter Page already. He had
on occasion done some work allegedly with the CIA.
Right. And
not like he was very, very highly educated. He fits their mold because he's a nondescript guy. He's a very, very highly educated guy. He spoke Russian. He was an expert on the oil industry, and he had some contacts at Rosneft, the Russian state oil company.
But a graduate of the U.S. Naval
West Point.
Yeah, a Naval Academy.
And he had credibility. He had international credibility with people in the oil arena.
So we know
but he was not. They obviously didn't have a very good psychological profile on him.
That's right.
Because he was not the guy that was going to either do something nefarious for money or B, do something stupid.
Right. And so we went over it the other day. We have exculpatory evidence on Michael Flynn, both the DNI and CIA records. I know they're redacted, but I can tell you guys 100%. They say DNI and CIA, where it says no derogatory information in all caps. It was released redacted. Take my word for it, or don't, whatever. It says CIA and DNI. So you have exculpatory evidence against Mike Flynn. In favor of Mike Flynn. They pursue that crap anyway. They have exculpatory evidence against Carter Page. They pursue that crap anyway. And like you said, with those profiles, that was kind of stupid. But, you work with the hand. I guess you play the hand you're dealt, right? And then Carter Page.
You said Flynn. Did you mean Flynn or did you mean Papadopoulos?
No, I mean Flynn, because I'm getting to the exculpatory evidence of Papadopoulos right now, which I have a screenshot of, and I will show you guys the transcript. This is the main time when they try to bait Papadopoulos outside of some of the, the Russian honeys. And
he never fell for that either.
He never fell for it.
Because you figure like 8 out of 10 people probably would.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, they don't do that because it doesn't work.
Right.
It couldn't hurt that.
It doesn't happen just in a James Bond movie.
No, right. They don't make that stuff up in James Bond movies and Tom Clancy novels, right?
Right.
So here is the transcript between George Papadopoulos and Mr. Weissman. Okay, Jeffrey Weissman. This is where he tries to bait him over Russia, and he tries to get Papadopoulos to admit the Trump campaign was behind, with Russia, in cahoots with Russia, behind some of the DNC hacks. Okay. You don't think anyone from the Trump campaign hacked her? And he just writes back, no. And CT is Target, by the way. All right. Confidential human is Weissman. And then email? No, nope. He goes back, Weissman. You don't think anyone, and let me get rid of this thing.
And notice he's getting one. Notice he's getting one-word answers from Papadopoulos.
That's right, Tim. And he keeps expanding his prodding, but he's still getting one-word answers.
Right.
You don't think anyone from the Trump campaign?
So George was on to him.
He, you know what he says though now that he wasn't, that he was just telling the truth. He suspected later, but now that this transcript that's up right now has been released, now he's saying 100% he knows it was him. And obviously we do know, right? Right? You don't think anyone from the Trump campaign had anything to do with fucking over the DNC, right?
Right.
No. That's it. No.
Right.
And apologies for the cursing, folks. This is typically a kid show. I'm reading verbatim. No. And then he comes back again. Really? No. I know that for a fact, Papadopoulos says.
Right.
This is called exculpatory evidence.
Right.
This is about the time when the operation ceases. This is about, but they just kept it up. And they just kept trying, Tim, beyond the point of even entrapment, right? So that was fishing for information, but then they move further and they start, through other stories we've reported on. Then they move even beyond that, Tim, and it's trying to get people to do things wrong because there's nothing there. So after a while, the investigation concludes there's nothing there. There's nothing there with Russia. This is it was a hoax. Right. So what do they do from that point on in? They know the Steele dossier is crap.
Right.
Christopher Steele, again, by the way, who sourced that dossier through his contacts with Russians, which is most of the reason why he doesn't even work for MI6 anymore. Media in America, American corporate media, continue to refer to this man as a former British spy at MI6. So you think he has some kind of credibility. He used to run the Russian desk over there, and they basically don't. Not basically. He doesn't run the Russian desk anymore. They thought he was compromised. There were people who thought Christopher Steele was a traitor. Okay. So he goes to all those buddies that they, that raised eyebrows, over at MI6 over. He sources the dossier with those people, lots of stuff with those people, and then pushes it to the FBI, the CIA circulating. Everybody's got it. They know it's crap. They even tried to get somebody like Mr. Weissman to get George Papadopoulos to admit to it. He doesn't. So they move on to other things, Tim, like trying to get people to do something wrong. This is third world police state crap.
Yep.
Third world police.
Yep.
This does not and is not really, because it does. I can't say it doesn't happen. It's obviously it happens. That's the sad reality. What typically is, it doesn't happen at this level. Like it doesn't happen to a candidate, a leading front runner candidate for the United States presidency. It doesn't happen to people who are on his team when he's the president elect. It doesn't happen to the president. Or maybe it does, folks. And that's why nothing ever changes, because everybody else just plays ball. They get caught with their you-know-what in their hand and they're stuck. So instead, they just play ball. Nothing ever changes, and we just continue down this cesspool, of managed decline. But along comes Donald Trump. Nobody around him is doing anything wrong, and he doesn't play ball. He doesn't. And this is what you get. This is what happens when you don't play ball. I mean, it's crazy that we're here, though, with this. I mean, at this point, we have got, I always told people to manage expectations, and I still think they should, because my main fear is that, like I said, half the country is going to conclude at some point that this system doesn't work for them. It's totally rigged against them. Voting doesn't work. The system, the mechanisms in place to carry out, make good on our social contract are corrupted. And that is when society devolves, man. That's when it devolves into violence. That's alternative measures of meaning alternative strategies for change. We can't have that. That's always been my greatest fear, always with this. And if it was Barack Obama, Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, I'd be just as outraged. The loser has to accept they've lost. The bureaucrat, the government itself, the permanent government, has got to know its place. If it doesn't, we're at a point where they think they can first prevent a president from being elected, then undo an election. If we're at that point, Tim, we're third world. What are your final thoughts on that?
Well, I think you're spot on. I mean, I think that it was, I already said it, but for all the intelligence of the FBI, they couldn't have picked the two worst people to try to use as a cudgel to get into the Trump campaign, to then go for somebody at a higher level and maybe even get the big guy himself, because those people were just both Papadopoulos was just too honest, maybe a little bit too savvy, and Carter Page was just too a very smart guy, very savvy guy. Has never denied that he's been done some stuff for the CIA on occasion. He was just too milk toast of a guy who did everything by the book.
And you would think the dossier on him at the CIA.
Look, the FBI's had a history of having people within their own organization that were double agents and crooks. Maybe they thought that this would be, it'd be easy to get one of these guys to do something for some financial or other incentives.
Yeah, this is like worse than Hansen.
A couple of decent questions. I can't.
Yeah, there is one made me laugh. Yeah. Have you seen it? Have you seen his wife? Why would he want a Russian woman? When we were talking about that before, I was thinking I have a very pretty wife, for people who know, and it wouldn't work on me either, but it does work. It does. Yeah, I have seen his wife. Yes, it does work. Because even with people who do have pretty wives, it works. Because men are, some men like variety. I mean, what can I tell you? It works, right? And then, they're devolves like Venezuela. Exactly right. I mean, this is a point where you also lose big part of your moral authority in the world, right? Because you can't be telling other countries that you can't be corrupt, like Ukraine used to laugh at us. You have Marie Yanukovych or Yovanovitch.
Right.
Everybody laughed at this over there. They laughed at it.
Right.
The State Department, the embassy in Kiev is a cesspool of corruption. It is strong arm. She's dirty. Right. All right. Herself. And they laughed over there. Look, the president, Vladimir Zelensky, he won running against the old corrupt guard of Petro Poroshenko, who was backed by people like Marie Yovanovitch.
Right.
He was elected to get rid of that old guard, and they elected him overwhelmingly. And here we are in America, supposed to be the land of law and order, the home of the free, right? What a joke. Think about what a joke we were to them over there, Tim. Todd, we'll mention this.
Is there a current field of thought on what the deal is with these two guys in Venezuela that were captured by the Venezuelan authorities?
So it looks like they sent 2 Green Berets or somebody, operators down there. They got caught.
But who sent them? I heard Pompeo's comment was, if we were involved in this, it would have been a very different result.
Right. Well, this is why I look, considering even my own Army experience, what I did in the Army, I have a very hard time believing that if we didn't want to kill Maduro, then we couldn't have killed Maduro. I mean, that's why some of this doesn't really make sense.
This was maybe a rogue operation being run by some.
How long did it take the CIA
subcontracted group that got out of control a little bit?
Trump, I hate to tell you guys this, but it's just true. If you weren't paying attention to the last segment, it's just true. He's not fully in charge of this government.
He's not. It took the CIA, he told, to stop their covert operation in Syria. They did not.
There are little groups within there that are out of control.
And I suspect we may just find out that this was some kind of rogue operation, Tim, which as somebody who was a soldier would be astonishing to me, because I would, at least during the time I was in the Army, would never have thought to undertake something like that. Like, look at my eyes right now. I just saw myself in the other camera view. It's incredible.
Don't you think the CIA uses retired Green Beret guys or Navy SEALs or other special op people as a pool of people that they might go tap for clandestine operations from time to time?
Absolutely, man. I got some buddies who were hurt, and they're it's hard when you get out of the military. You love your job. You do what you do. No other job compares to it. It's very hard to settle back into civilian life. A lot of my friends, I was lucky. I had Laura, even though I myself had a very hard time, which has been well documented. But I was lucky. I had like Laura, a good woman who loved me. I had a great dad. It was tough though. And a lot of my friends couldn't let it go, still can't let it go. And one in particular, one of my very close friends, was constantly taking contracting jobs, and eventually he paid the price for it. He got hurt. I mean, he's alive, but he got hurt, and it wasn't for the red, white, and blue. It was for money. It was for green. Right. So that's why I never wanted to partake in that. Going and getting your head blown off or losing your life for the country, Tim, is one thing. For losing it for money is when you have. If I had nothing else, I probably would have done it too, if I had nothing else to lean back on, but I did, but absolutely. The CIA grabs people up like that and uses and abuses them. I mean, that's really all they see them as being good for. It's sad, but it's just a reality. And I just don't think too, because Trump's not like fully in charge of the government, I could see a rogue pocket doing this, but it's incredible because what is it? It's 2020 now. Even 15 years ago, Tim, never would have thought something like this could ever happen. We're gonna have to see it play out. Trump says he has no idea. Pompeo made the comment you made, just because of what I know they're capable of, the capabilities.
Right.
I think it's pretty easy to kill Maduro, man. It's not. If you wanted him gone, if Trump wanted him gone, he'd be gone. There's nowhere to go. There aren't too many places to hide, my friend. You cannot really hide from us very long, but wow, it's 12:02. This was another great episode of Inside the Numbers. Listen, join us tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Everybody, before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube page. Give us the thumbs up. Don't forget to, if you're watching on Facebook or Scope, on Facebook, like the page People's Pundit Daily. I mean, this way you will get notified, just like when you're a subscriber on YouTube. You'll get notified before we go live. Scope watchers, don't forget to give us those hearts before you go, and follow the account that is streaming it. Streams on mine and on PPD's. Follow one, follow both. That'd be great. And then the ultimate way to support the show is to subscribe to PPD. You can do that by going to ppdnews.us/subscribe. I am the People's Pundit, Rich Barris, and I'm joined by Tim the Source Anderson. You guys can follow him on Twitter at TJAnderson1. And if you don't follow me already, you can follow me at Peoples_Pundit. I'll be on American Countdown with Robert Barnes at 8:30 tonight. All right. Tomorrow's Freewheeling Friday, Tim. Right. So we hope to see you guys back tomorrow. We'll answer all your questions and be safe. All the best. And we'll see you in the AM